Most people have never tested their will. They think they have. They've had hard days. They've pushed through fatigue. They've done things they didn't want to do. But that's not the same. Testing your will means putting it under real pressure. Sustained pressure. The kind that reveals what you're actually made of. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people's will collapses under the lightest weight. Not because they're weak, but because they've never trained it. They've spent their entire lives taking the path of least resistance, choosing comfort over challenge, immediate over important, easy over necessary. And then they wonder why, when it really matters. When the moment demands something from them, they fold. Building a strong will isn't mystical. It's not something you're born with. It's not genetics. It's not luck. It's training. Systematic, deliberate, uncomfortable training. And most people will never do it because the process of building will requires the very thing they don't have yet, the will to endure discomfort without immediate reward. It's a paradox. You need will to build will. But here's the secret. You don't need much. You just need enough to start, and you have that. Everyone has that. The question is whether you'll use it. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that will, virtue, strength of character, these aren't gifts from the gods. They're forged in the small daily decisions that no one sees. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they weren't superhuman. They were disciplined. They trained their will like an athlete trains their body, through repetition, through resistance, through choosing the hard thing again and again, until the hard thing became their default. And that's what we're going to explore today. Not theory, not philosophy, but the actual mechanics of building a will so strong that nothing can break it. A will that doesn't negotiate, doesn't waver, doesn't collapse when discomfort shows up. Let's begin. What will actually is. Let's start by defining what we're talking about, because most people confuse will with motivation. They think willpower is that surge of energy you feel when you're excited about something new, when you set a goal, when you imagine the outcome. But that's not will, that's enthusiasm. And enthusiasm evaporates, usually within 72 hours of setting any new goal. Will is different. Will is the capacity to choose action over feeling, to do what you committed to, regardless of how you feel in the moment. It's the gap between I don't want to and I'm doing it anyway. And in that gap between desire and discipline, that's where will lives. Will is what moves you when motivation is gone, when excitement has faded, when no one's watching, when there's no immediate reward, when every part of you wants to quit and you keep going anyway. Think of will like a muscle, because that's exactly what it is. Not physically, obviously, but functionally. When you use it, it gets tired. When you rest, it recovers. When you train it consistently, it grows stronger. And when you never use it, it atrophies. Most people are walking around with atrophied will, weak, flabby, unused. They can barely make it through a morning without checking their phone, can barely sit through discomfort without reaching for a distraction, can barely delay gratification for more than a few minutes. The Stoics called this self-command. Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery, that self-command, is will. It's the ability to govern your actions independently of your emotions, your urges, your immediate desires. Most people are slaves. They're controlled by cravings, by moods, by whatever feeling is loudest in the moment. And they call this being human. They call this being authentic. But it's not. It's being weak. It's being undisciplined. It's being controlled by the most primitive parts of your brain that just want comfort, want pleasure, want ease. Building will means developing a different relationship with those impulses. It doesn't mean you don't feel them. Not trying to become a robot. You're trying to become someone who feels the pull toward comfort, toward distraction, toward quitting, and chooses differently. Not once, not when you feel inspired, but consistently, as a pattern, as a way of life. That's a strong will, and it's available to anyone who's willing to train it. Why modern life destroys will. Here's what most people don't realize. The environment you live in is actively working against you. Modern life is designed for comfort, for ease, for instant gratification. Every system, every technology, every convenience is built to reduce friction, to make things easier, faster, more comfortable. And while that might sound good, while that might feel good, it's destroying your will. Because will is built through friction, through resistance, through choosing the harder path. And we've eliminated almost all of that. Think about it. You're cold? Adjust the thermostat. You're bored? Pull out your phone. You're hungry? Order food to your door. You're lonely? Scroll through social media. Every discomfort, every moment of friction has a button you can press to make it go away immediately. And every time you press that button, every time you choose comfort over challenge, you're training weakness. You're teaching yourself that discomfort is the enemy, that it should be avoided, that you can't handle it. And over time, that becomes your identity. Our ancestors didn't have this problem, not because they were better, but because they didn't have a choice. They had to hunt, they had to build, they had to endure cold, heat, hunger, fatigue. Their will was forged out of necessity, and that necessity created strength. But you don't have that. You have the opposite. You have a world that's engineered to remove necessity, to remove struggle, to remove the very conditions that build a strong will. So if you want to build it, you have to manufacture those conditions yourself. You have to deliberately choose difficulty when you could choose ease. And that goes against every message you've been fed your whole life. Society tells you, you deserve comfort. You've worked hard. Treat yourself. And there's nothing wrong with comfort occasionally, but when comfort becomes your default, when you're always choosing the easy path, always avoiding discomfort, always taking shortcuts, you're not living, you're atrophying. And the scariest part is, it happens slowly. You don't wake up one day and realize, I have no will. It's gradual, it's invisible, until the moment you need strength and it's not there. Seneca warned about this. He said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." Read that again. Difficulty isn't the problem. Your avoidance of difficulty is the problem. And modern life gives you infinite ways to avoid without it looking like avoidance. You're not quitting, you're being realistic. You're not weak, you're taking care of yourself. You're not lacking will, you're listening to your body. And all of those can be true sometimes, but most of the time, they're just comfortable lies that keep you from building the strength you need. The training ground of small decisions. Here's where people get it wrong. They think building will mean doing something dramatic, climbing mountains, running marathons, quitting everything cold turkey. And while those things can be part of it, they're not where will is actually built. Will is built in the small, invisible decisions, the ones that happen 100 times a day, the ones no one sees, the ones that don't impress anyone. Those are the reps. And just like in the gym, reps build strength. Every morning when your alarm goes off, you have a choice. Hit snooze or get up. That's a rep. Every time you want to check your phone during focused work, you have a choice. Scroll or stay present. That's a rep. Every time you want to eat something you know you shouldn't, you have a choice. Indulge or abstain. That's a rep. Every time you want to skip the workout, avoid the difficult conversation, put off the hard task, you have a choice. And that choice is either building will or eroding it. There's no neutral. You're always training something. This is what most people miss. They think, it's just one time. It's just this once. I'll start tomorrow. But there is no just one time, because every choice is practice. Every decision is training. And you're either practicing strength or you're practicing weakness. You're either building the habit of following through or you're building the habit of quitting. And your brain doesn't distinguish between big choices and small ones. It just learns patterns. If the pattern is, when things get uncomfortable, I fold, that becomes your default, and it will show up everywhere. In your work, in your relationships, in your health, in every area where strength is required. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being." He was emperor of Rome. He could have stayed. In bed, no one would have stopped him. But he understood that the morning decision, the small, unsexy choice to get up when you don't want to, that's where character is built. That's where will is forged. Not in the big, dramatic moments, but in the quiet, unglamorous ones. So, if you want to build will, start treating every small decision like it matters, because it does. The decision to take the stairs instead of the elevator. The decision to make your bed when you'd rather not. The decision to sit in silence instead of reaching for your phone. These aren't trivial. These are reps. And if you do enough reps, you build strength. Will versus emotion. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking they need to change how they feel before they can act differently. They wait to feel motivated, wait to feel energized, wait to feel ready. And while they're waiting, their will atrophies. Because will isn't about feeling, it's about acting despite feeling. It's about learning that your emotions are information, not instructions. Here's what building will teaches you. You can feel tired and still train. You can feel unmotivated and still work. You can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel like quitting and still continue. Your feelings don't have to dictate your behavior. And this is revolutionary, because most people have never experienced this. They've always obeyed their feelings, and they think that's just how life works. But it's not. That's just how weak will works. When you start training will, when you start choosing action over emotion, you discover something powerful. Feelings are temporary. They rise, they peak, they fade. But your will, your decision to act regardless, that can be permanent. That can be your foundation. And once you build that foundation, once you prove to yourself that you can move through discomfort, everything changes. Because you're no longer at the mercy of your emotional weather. You're no longer waiting for the perfect feeling to arrive before you start. Epictetus taught his students to separate what's in their control from what isn't, and feelings aren't in your control. They arise automatically, based on circumstances, on brain chemistry, on 1,000 factors you can't manage. But your response to those feelings, that's entirely yours. You can feel angry and still speak with calm. You can feel anxious and still take the next step. You can feel resistance and still do the work. That's the power of a trained will. Most people think, I'll do it when I feel like it. But people with strong will know, I'll do it, and eventually I might feel like it, or I might not. Either way, I'm doing it. That shift from feeling dependent to will dependent is the difference between people who start things and people who finish them, between people who have potential and people who have results. And here's what's interesting. When you build this capacity, when you prove to yourself again and again that you can act regardless of feeling, your feelings start to change. Not because you tried to change them, but because your brain learns new patterns. It learns that discomfort isn't dangerous, that resistance isn't a stop sign, that the gap between impulse and action isn't something to be afraid of. And gradually, the emotional resistance gets quieter, not because you suppressed it, but because you outgrew it. The compound effect of choosing difficulty. There's a concept in strength training called progressive overload. You don't build muscle by lifting the same weight forever. You build it by gradually increasing resistance. And the same principle applies to will. If you want to build it, you have to progressively choose harder things. Not all at once. Not in ways that break you, but in ways that stretch you. This is where most people fail. They either never increase the difficulty, they stay comfortable, do the same easy things, and wonder why they're not growing. Or they try to jump too far, too fast. They go from doing nothing to trying to do everything, and they collapse under the weight building will requires calibration. You need to find the edge of your capacity and then push slightly beyond it. Not so far that you break, but far enough that you grow. Let me give you practical examples. Maybe right now, your will is weak. You can barely get out of bed on time. You can't resist checking your phone. You can't sit with discomfort for more than a few minutes. Don't start by trying to meditate for an hour, or run a marathon, or fast for 3 days. Start with something you can actually do. Set your alarm 15 minutes earlier and get up when it rings. Put your phone in another room for 30 minutes. Sit in silence for 5 minutes without distraction. These might sound small, but if they're hard for you, they're perfect. Because the goal isn't to impress anyone. The goal is to build capacity. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. When you choose difficulty at the edge of your ability, your capacity expands. What was hard becomes normal, and you can push a little further. 15 minutes becomes 30, becomes an hour. 5 minutes of silence becomes 10, becomes 20. One workout becomes 3, becomes 5. And each level builds on the last. Each choice compounds the ones before it, until you look up one day and realize you're doing things that 6 months ago seemed impossible. And not because you tried to do the impossible, but because you built the capacity gradually through small, persistent choices. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. But here's what he didn't say explicitly. Habits are built through progressive challenge. If you repeat easy things, you build easy habits. If you progressively choose harder things, you build strong habits. You build capacity. You build will. And that will becomes the foundation for everything else. This is why people who train physically often become more disciplined in other areas. It's not that exercise magically makes you better. It's that the practice of choosing discomfort, of pushing through, resistance of doing the hard thing. That practice transfers. The will you build in the gym shows up in your work. The will you build in cold showers shows up in difficult conversations. The will you build saying no to distractions shows up when you need to say no to temptations. What breaks most people? Let's talk about where most people quit, because understanding this can help you avoid it. Most people quit when the novelty wears off, when the initial excitement fades, when the process becomes repetitive and boring. They can handle difficulty when it feels significant, when it feels like they're making progress. but they can't handle difficulty when it feels pointless, when it feels like nothing's changing. This is the valley. This is where will is actually tested. Not in the beginning when motivation is high, not at the end when you can see the finish line, but in the middle, the long, boring middle, where you're doing the work and nothing seems to be happening, where you're making the hard choices and you can't see the results yet. This is where weak will collapses. Because here's the truth about building will. Most of the work is invisible. You're laying foundation. You're making deposits in an account you can't see. And for a long time, there's no obvious payoff. You're getting up early and you're still tired. You're training and you don't look different. You're doing the work and nothing seems to change. And your brain, which is designed to seek immediate feedback, starts screaming. This isn't working. You're wasting your time. You should quit. And this is the moment. This is the test. Because if you quit here, you prove that your will is still weak, that you still need visible progress to continue. But if you push through, if you keep going without the reward, without the feedback, without the validation, you're building something rare. You're building the capacity to persist based on commitment, not evidence, based on decision, not feeling. And that's when real strength develops. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." But he didn't say obvious difficulties or rewarding difficulties. He said difficulties, period. The boring ones, the invisible ones, the ones that don't feel like they're changing anything. Those are often the most important because they're teaching you to act from principle, not from payoff. This is why so many people cycle through goals, through habits, through commitments. They start strong, they're motivated, they make progress, they feel good. But then the middle comes, the plateau, where effort continues, but visible results slow. And they interpret that as failure. So they quit. They start something new. They chase the feeling of progress instead of building the capacity to persist without it. But people with strong will, they know this pattern. They expect the valley. They plan for it. And when it comes, when the work feels pointless, when nothing seems to be changing, they don't take it as a sign to quit. They take it as confirmation that they're in the exact place where growth happens, where will is forged, where character is tested. And they keep going, not with gritted teeth, not with desperate effort, just with steady, unglamorous persistence. The identity shift. Here's what people don't tell you about building will. At some point, if you stay consistent, something shifts. It's not that the hard things become easy, it's that you become someone who does hard things. The action doesn't change your relationship to it, does. You stop being someone who's trying to build will and start being someone who has it. This is an identity shift, and it's subtle. You don't announce it. You don't necessarily feel it as a single moment, but you notice it in how you move through the world. You notice that you don't negotiate with yourself anymore, that when you commit to something, you do it. That discomfort doesn't scare you. That resistance doesn't stop you. People around you start to notice too, not always consciously, but they feel something different. See that you're steady, that you're reliable, that when you say you're going to do something, it happens. And they start treating you differently. They give you more responsibility, more trust, because you've become someone who can handle it. Someone whose will is strong enough to support not just your own goals, but the weight of what others need from you. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." And building will is exactly this. It's the daily choice to become someone whose actions are governed by decision, not by circumstance, by commitment, not by feeling, by will, not by weakness. And once you've built this, once you've made enough hard choices that it becomes who you are, you unlock something most people never find. you find that you're actually capable of far more than you thought. Not because you got stronger suddenly, but because you removed the limits you'd accepted. The limits of, I can't. I'm not that kind of person. That's too hard for me. All of those were just stories based on weak will. And when will gets strong, the stories change. Marcus Aurelius was constantly reminding himself of his capacity. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But that realization, that recognition of power, it comes from practice, from proof, from building will, strong enough that you know without question you can handle whatever comes. This doesn't mean you become arrogant or that you think you're invincible. It means you have evidence, you have a history of choosing hard things and following through. And that history becomes unshakable confidence, not in outcomes, not in success, but in your ability to persist, to endure, to keep going. And that's worth more than any skill, any talent, any advantage. The daily practice. So how do you actually build this? How do you go from weak will to strong will? It's simpler than you think, but harder than you want it to be. It starts with identifying one area where your will is weakest. One place where you consistently fold, where you always choose comfort over challenge. Maybe it's sleep, you can't get up on time. Maybe it's food, you can't resist cravings. Maybe it's focus, you can't resist distractions. Maybe it's conflict, you can't have hard conversations. Whatever it is, name it. Don't judge it. Don't shame yourself. Just identify the weakest link. Then create one non-negotiable standard in that area. Not 10 standards, one. Make it specific, make it measurable, and make it something you can do every single day. I will get up at 6 a.m. no matter how I feel. I will train for 30 minutes every morning. I will work for 2 hours without checking my phone. I will say what needs to be said, even when it's uncomfortable. And then, here's the part that matters. You honor that standard every single day for 30 days. Minimum. Not when you feel like it. Not when it's convenient. Every single day. No exceptions. No negotiations. No excuses. This is your training ground. This is where you build will. And it will be hard. There will be mornings when you don't want to get up. There will be days when you want to skip the workout. There will be moments when you want to check your phone. And every single one of those moments is a rep. It's an opportunity to choose will over comfort, to prove to yourself that you can. Here's what will happen in those 30 days. The first week will be the hardest. Your brain will fight you. It will throw every excuse, every rationalization, every feeling at you. You're tired. You deserve a break. One day won't matter. Let them come. Acknowledge them. And act anyway. The second week, you'll want to quit. The novelty will be gone. It won't feel significant anymore. It will just feel hard and repetitive. This is the valley. This is where most people break. Don't you? Keep going. The third week, something shifts. It's still hard, but it's less hard. Your brain starts accepting this as normal. The resistance gets quieter. Not because you're suppressing it, but because you're building new neural pathways. The fourth week, you start to feel it. The strength, the capacity, the will. And more importantly, you have proof. You have 30 days of evidence that when you commit to something, you follow through. That your word to yourself means something. That you have will. And then you expand. You take that strength and you apply it to another area. You add another standard. You push into new territory. And you repeat the process. Gradually, systematically, building capacity in every part of your life. Until strong will isn't something you're trying to develop, it's just who you are. The power of developed will. Let me tell you what happens when you build real will. When you've done the work, when you've trained consistently, when you've become someone whose will is strong. First, you become unshakable. Not because nothing bothers you, but because you know you can handle it. Crisis comes, and you don't panic. You respond. Difficulty comes, and you don't fold. You adapt. Uncertainty comes, and you don't freeze. You move. Because you've built the capacity to act regardless of circumstance. Second, you become trustworthy to yourself. This is huge. Most people can't trust themselves. They make promises they don't keep. They set standards they don't honor. They say they'll do something, and they don't. But when you've built will, when you've proven to yourself over and over that you follow through, you develop a different relationship with your commitments. When you say you're going to do something, you know you will. And that creates an internal peace that nothing else can provide. Third, you become valuable to others. Because everyone is looking for people they can count on. People who don't fold under pressure, who don't quit when things get hard, who don't need perfect conditions to perform. And when you become that person, opportunities open, doors appear. People trust you with more. Not because you asked for it, but because you've demonstrated capacity. Fourth, you become free. And this is the paradox. Most people think freedom is doing whatever you want, but that's not freedom. That's slavery to impulse. Real freedom is having the will to do what you've decided matters, regardless of what you want in the moment. It's being able to choose your hard instead of having hardship chosen for you. And finally, you become who you said you wanted to be. Because the gap between who you are and who you want to be, that gap is always bridged by will, by the capacity to do what you committed to, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Building will is the do what you have to do part. It's the work that transforms declaration into reality, intention into identity, words into life. Most people want strong will, but they're not willing to do what it takes to build it. They want the result without the process, the strength without the training, the capacity without the reps. But that's not how it works. You don't get strong will by wanting it. You get it by building it. One small, difficult choice at a time, one uncomfortable moment at a time, one day at a time. And if you do that, if you commit to the process, if you honor the small daily decisions, if you push through the valley, if you refuse to negotiate with comfort, something remarkable happens. You become someone you can count on, someone who doesn't need perfect conditions, someone whose word means something. Someone with unbreakable will. And that person can do anything, not because they're special, but because they've built the capacity to persist through anything. And persistence beats talent, beats luck, beats circumstances, beats everything. So start today, right now. Identify the one area where your will is weakest. Create one non-negotiable standard and honor it for the next 30 days. No exceptions, no negotiations, no comfortable lies. Because the world doesn't need more people with good intentions. It needs people with strong will, people who follow through, people who persist, people who build. Be that person, build that will, and everything else will follow. Stay focused. Stay grounded. The strength you build in private becomes the power you carry in public. And that power starts with will. Build it.